Hi, welcome to Unique Parenting. I am V Moise, and today I want to talk to you guys about when you give advice and how advice is being received by your child or even an individual in general. Like when you give advice, how do you think that advice is being perceived or how will it be utilized? I am big on giving advice so that it can be used as a tool, right? I think for me, I love receiving advice and I love putting it in place as a tool to be used for something or for a later point in time as a point of reference. But I think of advice as, man, this is information that I can store and use for later when I need it. And that's why I give advice. I think that's why most people give advice. I'm not sure. I don't have the data on that, but I think that's what it is. Now, recently I've discovered, especially as my children have gotten older, that my advice is not typically used as a tool. Sometimes it is simply used as a coping mechanism. And what I mean by that is it is just an information that you can retrieve for later. It is, but not to utilize as a tool, but just to kind of get you over the particular hump or the particular thing that you're experiencing at this moment, where it's something you use to cope with, but it isn't something you utilize as a tool. Now, whether your advice is a tool or whether it is a coping mechanism, either one is fine. Like I realize having two neurodivergent children with different personalities and perspectives and just, they're different. They're beautifully different. One of my children utilize advice for tool where I see that they store it, take it when needed, apply it to the particular setting and situation, where another child, one of my other kid, basically use it as a coping mechanism. Like, oh, okay, this is what I need to get through this moment or this time or this experience. And I'm glad that I have it, because that's what a coping mechanism is. It's something that you have to get you through this moment, this time, this situation. It may not necessarily be something that you pull out to utilize and use, right? The way you use the usage of it is different. So whether a child is using advice for a tool, as a tool, or they're using advice as a coping mechanism, either one is fine. And I think a big point of frustration for parents can be, well, you're not utilizing this advice how I intended it to be used. You're not really responsible for that, and you don't really get to control how someone utilize the advice that you're giving them, especially children. You just kind of have to sit back and see what they do with it, whether they utilize it as a tool or they use it as a coping mechanism. Either one is fine. I'm sure there are other ways that people kind of, process information and utilize advice and do what they're going to do with it. But I've just noticed those two particular things in my kids, but also in the work that I do. As a parent coach, I give advice. I'm literally giving advice right now. And sometimes my advice is just, okay, B said this, and it's a great coping mechanism, but we won't put anything in place. And sometimes I see people and people email me and say, and of course in just conversation, and they'll say, yeah, we implemented this and we did this that way. Now, I have learned throughout the years I've been doing this that they're both okay. I think the perfectionist in me initially was just like, advice need to be given and so that people could utilize it as a tool. The end. That was dumb. I'm sorry. But in reality, it's that you can't control how people utilize a piece of information that you're giving them. And I've grown and understand that it's either way, and they're both fine, and they're both helping, really. Like no matter what, the advice was helpful. Whether, it was utilized as a tool or whether it was utilized as a coping mechanism, it helped. And ultimately, that is what's most important. So especially when you have, a neurodivergent child, you really have no idea what they're going to do with that advice, because let's face it, neurodivergent brain process information differently, and you never know how they're going to use it. So I know, again, for me personally, I use advice as a tool, but I know a lot of different people who use advice as a coping mechanism. So whatever it is that your child is doing with that piece of advice, let them do that with it. Okay, it's okay. They don't have to use it the way you believe it was intended to be used. So, in the meantime, I want you all to enjoy your unique parenting journey with your unique child.